Hi, everybody, and welcome to 5 reasons why your training is failing and what to do about it. We're going to have a great time today. I think we've got some really good content. We're going to love hearing your questions as we go through. What I'm going to do in just a moment is I'm going to switch over to a slideshow. We've got a bit of content, and then we'll come back on live here to respond to your questions as well. So let me pop over to the screen share so you can see my slides. So you should see on your screen now 5 reasons why your training is failing and what to do about it. So our focus today is really to take a look at how to make a training program most effective. And ultimately, our goal is to have high performing, high functioning team members that self-actualize, that find ways to perform way above and beyond our expectations in a very empowered environment. And as we go through this today, again, please share your questions with us. Many of you submitted some questions that will be wonderful for us to go through, and we're certainly looking forward to hearing additional questions. So Confucius, always great to quote at the beginning of any workshop: I hear and I forget, I see and I remember, I do and I understand. And ultimately, it's the competence to understand and execute is really what we want in our individuals. And so we'll come back and align with that statement as we go through. So this gives you a hint of some of the questions that we've received. We'll address these at the end. And again, I'll come back on screen to do this. And what you'll find is whether you're joining us on YouTube live here or through Google Plus, you should have a mechanism on both of those platforms to submit real-time questions. And again, we'll get to those at the conclusion. So we really appreciate it. And I should say that any questions that for whatever reason we don't get to, or you don't get to submit in some way, or you don't have a chance to submit, let's talk afterwards. Let's have a conversation. We'd love to hear more about your world, understand some of the things that are going really well for you in terms of your training program and where you're challenged, and certainly be more than happy to share our learning with you as well. So let's hop right into it. And a little bit about our agenda. So we're going to talk about sort of the background of this topic. We'll get into the 5 sort of primary challenges that we see, talk about some opportunities, and then address those 5 opportunities with specific steps to success. And then, of course, we'll get to your questions. Just so you have a little bit of a sense of my background, I'm the CEO of a company called Test My Pitch. And we, as a consequence of that work and also my background, I've had the opportunity to get into many different training settings, everything from corporate enterprise level training to collegiate training and education, to a variety of economic development related training programs. And so ultimately this content is based on those observations, that background, plus what's been contributed by our team as well. So the certain disclaimer in this is that nobody's viewpoint is complete, and mine I know isn't. And so we'll do the best we can to share the best we see, and certainly rely on your input to help us continue to evolve and continue to share better and better information. So I think there'll be some good nuggets in here for everybody. And the span of participants in this workshop is pretty broad, everything from folks in universities to some corporate individuals, to folks who are in a variety of economic development roles. So we do have a pretty broad audience, and that should be helping our perspective as well. So just so you have a sense of our organization, and we don't intend at all for these workshops, these webinars, to be self-promotional, but again, this may help with context. We have 2 online tools. One is called Test My Pitch. Think of it like if we took the notion of Toastmasters and put it online. The platform helps, whether it's students, professionals, entrepreneurs, develop their communications skills in a safe and collegial environment. And then Score My Pitch is a pitch event judging and feedback system. So not only does the system make results more reliable because of the way it's architected, but it also offers incredible volumes of contextual feedback so that ventures move forward much quicker. So that gives a quick snapshot of us. Now let's really get into talking about this topic. So by way of background, really probably the best graphic we could share with you here is that the idea of having uh, our team uh, have demonstrable behaviors that lead to success, essentially not just having the knowledge or the motivation, but the skills uh, and the skills, but to actually be able to put to practice and with the desire and ability to put that to practice, those things they need to do to be successful. That's ultimately training. The real goal of training is to have people that do good work, and whatever that work is, we want them to be successful. It's intended to be something that not just enables but empowers, and so it's not just based on knowledge, because there are certainly plenty of people that are book smart that don't get off the couch, aren't called to action in some way, and then of course there are those that have the knowledge but have they know how to play football, but they can't play football, if you will. They don't have the skills that allow them to be successful in that endeavor. And so it's really the composite of those three basic elements that creates competence and confidence. And so we want to make sure that whatever training program we develop addresses each of those three things, from knowledge to motivation and aptitude, or I'm sorry, motivation and attitude to actually having the skills. And so we're certainly going to come back to this idea. So here are the 5 challenges that we see in training and where it tends to go off the rails. The first is that many times training has poor organizational alignment. In other words, the training doesn't it's not aligned with the direction of the organization, and so consequently there's incongruency, and that incongruency creates situations where we're essentially setting up our team for failure. We're not preparing them to be successful and giving them the tools they need to be successful. It's almost like saying, our goal is to build a house, but we're going to give you, knitting, the variety of tools you might use if you were knitting something. And so, as hard as someone might try, they're not going to be able to build a house with that equipment. We could yell at them, we can berate them all we want, but it unfortunately will not create that result. So obviously we've got to get a situation where the training and the organizational objectives are very much aligned. So as Anthony Hopkins or Tony Hopkins says, it's not what we do once in a while that shapes our lives. It's what we do consistently. And so we want to make sure that our training sets people up so that they can be consistent and successful. So the second challenge that we see is that there's poor organizational commitment. So that can come in a variety of shapes, everything from having managers who aren't implementing sort of the executive plan, situations where the executives may not be on board with training, but ultimately whatever the lack of commitment, however it manifests itself, without organizational commitment, it's really difficult to affect success. And in fact, that success more often than not gets sabotaged and can be really challenged. Zig Ziglar said it really well. It was character that got us out of bed, commitment that moved us into action, and discipline that enabled us to follow through. Very true, and certainly appropriate. So the third issue that we see is that training more often than not is not needs based or relevant to the individual. This comes in many ways. One scenario is that many times training is sort of an annual process. And so, as you can imagine, if you put a group of people into any annual process, there are going to be some people that that training speaks directly to. There are going to be others that it's too late for, and there are going to be others that it's too early for. And so it's how do we get training so that it's based on what specific individuals need at that moment, because it's ultimately not just what they need, but if they put it into practice immediately, it actually goes from knowledge to competence, which is really what we want to get to. So understanding what's relevant for the individuals and the organization really is keeps us moving forward and in a really fast way. So you can't lead people if you aren't going to focus on what's relevant to you and to them. Israel Moore Avior is certainly correct there. Another challenge to training is it's not integrated and referential. So in other words, it is not, again, going back to that previous example where in many organizations training is infrequent, maybe annual. That language is more foreign if it's infrequent, and if it's integrated, then it becomes a part of the daily life, the daily focus of the organization. And in fact, every moment becomes a learning moment. And so every waypoint becomes instructional, and the organization learns much quicker that way. And so we want to make sure that we take a look at, how integrated our training is, our learning ultimately is, because training, you know, what we're really looking to get to is learning and execution from that learning. And so we want to look at how integrated, and when I say referential, how are we giving ourselves really good waypoints or really good ways to identify how we're progressing. Are we able to see incremental change, and do we have those types of indicators that help us progress? So, Jim Rohn, success is neither magical nor mysterious. Success is the natural consequence of consistently applying basic fundamentals. So true. And usually when people can execute well in the fundamentals, they are very much on the road to success. The final kind of big challenge that we see with training is that it's not generally behaviorally focused. It's more often than not knowledge focused, which knowledge is certainly part of the equation, but it's only one of, at least from our perspective, a three-part equation. So we want to make sure that not only do we have the knowledge, but we're doing the rest of the activities around training that cause the appropriate behavior in our team and in ourselves. And so, it's sort of, you almost might analogize this to, and you sort of imagine that, just to pick a goal here, just imagine, sort of we're on the East Coast and our goal is to drive to the West Coast. And so if we're driving on I-95, and let's just say that's our behavior, we're driving on I-95, it really doesn't matter how fast or how long we're on I-95, that direction will not get us to Los Angeles, that sort of method. And so we have to change our behavior, we have to change our direction, and then we could drive almost as slow as we want. If we took a 90-degree turn, we would at some point get to the West Coast and could easily get to Los Angeles from there. So, again, we've got to be going in the right direction, and we've got to be doing it in a way that creates the success that we want. If we're not going that direction, we shouldn't expect the results, and that's that can be the challenge for many training programs. So Bobby Knight, this is probably one of my favorite quotes. He said that he wanted to work with players not who had the will to win. He says everybody has that, but he said it's really about the will to prepare to win that's most important. So the idea of practice, we sort of get what we do, and if we're not prepared to practice consistently and well, then we shouldn't expect good results when we get into the game. And so certainly an intelligent comment there. So let's talk about, from these challenges, these 5 challenges, let's talk about the opportunities and where do we want to get our organization to? What's sort of the ultimate objectives here? So number one is we want to empower our people. We want to get them so they can act independently and effectively, and really this, this is necessary from several standpoints. Number one is, if we're burdened by making, if managers or executives are burdened by making every decision or doing all the activity, obviously we're going to be very inefficient. The other big issue here is that we're not really preparing the next generation of leadership, and we have to allow people to make mistakes, to make decisions. And a lot of what we see that challenges organizations is people generally aren't prepared to make decisions because they've never been given that opportunity. And so when a decision comes, they really don't know how to make them well because they haven't trained or practiced or used that muscle before. So empowerment's really key. We want to set up our team for success. Certainly a big part of retention is the gratification people get from their work, and success here far outstrips pay in almost any survey you will read. So if we're helping our team develop the muscles where they can realize more success, then we're going to have not only a better organization, we're going to have more committed people, we're going to have a really vibrant workplace that is getting things done. And in fact, when we have a team like that, it's much easier to recruit additional team members that look like that. People want to be around, people want to be on winning teams, and they want to be around success. So when you sort of, success can create success here. And finally, we want to from this, we want to improve results. We want to, the best way to have a sustainable organization is to have a successful organization. It's not a guarantee of success, but certainly without good results, it's going to be very difficult to be sustainable. So as our team performs better, as they self-actualize, as they are effective, we can do nothing as an organization but improve, and that's really, really key. And so as we look at, when we do training well, we want to make sure that we understand what's the end game, where are we trying to get to. And certainly ultimately it's about empowering people, it's about setting people up for success and creating better organizational results. So now that we've kind of looked at these things, how do we become successful? How do we build a successful training program? And so we probably haven't covered everything we're going to need to cover in this, but I think these 5, if we can execute on these 5 steps, we're going to be a long way towards being a much better organization from a training standpoint. So number one is to make sure that our organization is aligned and that our training is aligned with our organization. So first, obviously, we have to define the organization and its goals, and then align our training to that. So we need to start with the desired outcomes. Where do we want this to go? What does success look like? And what, as we look at our organization, how do we align the roles with those outcomes? So really, what are the outcomes, and then what are the roles we need to accomplish that? Again, just like imagine when you're doing a home project, you want to put in, maybe you want to put in a skylight or something, and the first thing you do is you say, well, what tools, what skills do I need to accomplish this task? And you don't, imagine if you didn't consider that, you'd end up with all the wrong tools and all the wrong skills, and probably not a very good looking skylight, one that probably lets in more water than you want, or something silly like that. So if I were going to sort of suggest just a quick how-to list, here's the how-to list. First is, as an organization, have a really clear mission, vision, and values. And, and these shouldn't be long or complicated or challenging to create. If they are, you're doing it wrong. These should be simple and exceptionally clear. And the whole goal isn't that just a few people in the organization understand them. It's that they need to communicate to everybody. So the more simple and direct they are, the better. We need to understand the organization's short and long-term objectives. And then, of course, we need to identify the roles to accomplish those objectives. Number two, we need to assure our organizational commitment. And so this is certainly going to include the executives and managers and making sure that they're on board, and ideally they're leading the charge. Even if they're not really, but the public face of leading it, it's so much better if it's the top executives or even the CEO who leads the charge and who reinforces the importance of training. Ultimately, that will really help determine the success of the program. And then, of course, aligning performance measures to those objectives and to the training, so that there are, at every turn, the objectives by role are being reinforced in every way. And in fact, that you get so many more training moments, positive training moments over this. And this isn't, the whole goal here is not that we're not at all aiming to be punitive. We're actually aiming to reinforce good behavior. The more positive a training program is, the better. And I mean that without being superficial. So it's got to, there's a limit of positivity, right? You want to make sure that it's content rich, that it is true and believable, and ultimately aligned very well with the outcomes of the organization that the organization wants. So a couple of quick hits here of how to do this. Do not move without executive commitment. It's so easy to get excited and move forward, and then if you try to get executive commitment later, that can be a challenge. So we want to get it at the beginning. And again, I would suggest, if the executives are at all hesitant or they reserve their commitment, do not leave go. Stay at the starting line until you have their commitment, because if you don't, it's going to be hard for them to get them on board later on. You need them to champion this. And then, of course, once they're in, keep them in the movie. Make them the poster child, or at least as a minimum, do regular reporting, even if you're not asked for it. Keep them in the movie, keep them engaged, keep them involved. This is really, it's mission critical that you keep that executive support through the process. Again, it's less about protection of jobs. It'll be difficult to create the results because the managers and, in fact, the employees, the staff, will understand and sense any lack of commitment, and that'll make it much harder for you to sort of get done what you need to get done to cause the appropriate behavioral change through the training program. Number three, you need to identify the needs and the gaps. So really important that we understand what we're doing well and what we're not. Each of us has skills that are appropriate and very meaningful for our role, and ones that we're missing. And so, one of the things I actually saw recently, I was talking to an executive who we were talking about sort of, how do they decide what training to run? And I was really amazed by the answer I got. And this lady told me that they decide what training to run every year by what the employees say that they would like to be trained on. What essentially the survey goes out, what training would you like? And there are a bunch of check boxes, and people say, this or that or this or that. And so there was, an asterisk. So how then, how does that relate to what they need? Because those are, can be two different things. And I had some experience with this both in terms of training, corporate training and whatnot, but I'll relate something very personal. I'm a cyclist. I compete, have competed a fair amount in cycling, and I use an online coach, and what that coach has changed for me. I discovered that what I used to do when I was determining my own training is I would choose to do the things that I was good at, because I don't know why. They were comfortable for me. Maybe I wanted that reinforcement. I've been pretty good at going up hills on a bicycle, and so I would tend my training plan. I'd be on hills 5 days a week, and it was great. But the problem is I plateaued. I never got any better at going up hills at a certain point. And other people, my peers, they were starting to go better than me and go faster. And so I asked them, "Hey, what are you doing?" And they said, "Well, we're working on the things that we don't like to work on. We're working on the things that, we're working with this coach who's got a much more balanced program, and we're doing things, on flat road. We're working on speed. We're working on, high tension, whatever it is." But the point really is that it's very hard for an individual to self-assess and to be successful in identifying their training needs. And so in order to be successful, there has to be a process for that. So we need to identify the critical skills by role. What do we need? And then what's each individual's skill inventory? What are they good at? Where are their gaps? And then the training should help overcome those gaps and reinforce where we're strong. But what I found as a cyclist is I actually became a better hill climber when I was better over all around. And so by being more balanced, my strengths actually got stronger besides my weaknesses getting stronger. So we can measure, there are generally three ways to measure how, sort of individual skill gaps. And certainly you could do self-reported, and I think we've identified the challenges with that. You could do it through observation, create some kind of scorecard for the managers to fill out on each employee and try to identify those things. And the other is that there are actually, by role, there are generally some really good diagnostics available that would help sort of be more objective, not be biased by managers and sort of any type of sort of human error that's in there. You could have a very consistent way to do it. And often these diagnostic tools are very inexpensive. And again, it would help you be, even if it was a marginal diagnostic tool, it would be consistent. It would give you a better view. And there are actually some really good diagnostic tools by role. So that gives some indications how to do this. We'd certainly recommend going more towards diagnostic. So number 4, so we want to make sure we integrate our measures and training together. And so, it's, most of our organizations, we've got a variety of ways to measure, kind of everything we do, from sales performance to customer service and sort of accounts payable and receivable and so on. Well, each of those measures is a training opportunity. And so we want to make sure that we have a very integrated process between the things we're doing to run our business and the metrics that are being used and the reporting that's being used, and aligning that with training. Training shouldn't be an annual process. It should be a daily process. And so by integrating how we're viewing our business and how we're learning about our business and how we're developing skills, the more those can be coupled together, the better and faster our people are going to evolve. So when you become a learning organization, your efficiency and effectiveness goes up dramatically. So by beginning to understand benchmarking and using the variety of reports that you have on your business as tools to inform learning opportunities and to inform sort of constant training, and the more you can engage your team, your employees in this process, the more they're going to gain through it. So in typical training, and as you can see, the sort of ability of each individual really plateaus at a certain point unless you're finding ways to integrate training and the way you're measuring your organization. And ultimately, this allows you to have much more just-in-time training. And so when you can do that, when you can make training more real time, it's going to be much easier your training becomes much more efficient. I almost sort of analogize this to if you've ever traveled to a foreign country. I think a lot of training today kind of goes at it like I maybe when I go to a country where I don't speak the language. My method to be understood is to just simply speak louder. So I'll say something. Maybe I'm at a restaurant and I'm trying to order a meal, and the person taking the order doesn't understand me. My method isn't to learn their language. My method is usually to just say what I said a minute ago louder, and I may even do that a couple of times. Fairly ignorant, actually, but it's unfortunately the method that we learn. And so certainly one that would be more enlightened would be to focus on how do we sort of leverage these learning moments real time and allow people to evolve very quickly. And when we give it to them in smaller nuggets that they can rationalize in the moment, we're going to find that our team evolves much quicker, and in fact we empower them much better, and they become much more committed to the process. So the things that we want to look at doing, we want to look at democratizing performance. We want to look at self-measurement and reporting, and we want to look at peer and manager support. And so there's something we created, and I'm happy to talk to anybody offline about this. There probably isn't time in the context of this webinar, but we created several years ago, and have used it in several businesses, something that we call the employee self-management system, which is actually epitomizes exactly what I'm talking about here, the sort of incorporation of the sort of business objectives and measures with the training program. And in fact, the system has progressed to the point where employees actually know how they performed, and they self-report it every single day. And so they're learning, and they see how they're doing relative to their peers. And this is in our world, this is not a punitive system, and our team all sees and understands that. But what we actually see happening is that the team ends up, each individual sees what the other individuals are strong at, and they begin partnering and buddying and leveraging each other's strengths. And so that the things that you're strong at, I actually, because we build a relationship, I begin learning from you where you're strong, and also what you do to be strong in that area. And I essentially leapfrog you. I'm able to learn your skills, learn those strengths, and make them my own. And likewise, you're able to do that of mine. And so we found this to be an incredible tool, and one that really empowers our team. And again, I'm happy to share more details with anybody that would like to know more about that. So, but ultimately, if we play the movie all the way forward, what we're endeavoring to do is to create a culture of excellence, and that that not only is that the expectation, but that people know they're a part of a team that is doing something remarkable, and that it's ultimately aligned with sort of what our customers need and what will propel the business forward fastest. So number 5, focus on transferred skills and action. So we want to make sure that it's not just about the checkbox that, okay, we did training and we dumped this information off. We want to make sure that actually the training had an effect. What did people learn from it? Did this training actually result in better skills and better actions? In other words, are people not just knowledgeable, but do they have the ability, and are they using that ability? So this really comes to a simple formula. We want to make sure that the training sort of resulted in the appropriate activities and the appropriate quality of activity. So are we doing enough activity, and is the activity at a state of quality that it's going to create the results we want? Ultimately, we don't have to, if we're doing enough of something and we're doing it well enough, we don't really have to worry about the results. One of the things I've looked at a lot over time, we actually had a business for a while that was a behavioral change business. It was focused on weight loss. And, there wasn't a soul that we saw in that business. And, we're talking about people who are, so in some cases modestly overweight to grossly overweight. But there wasn't a single person in that business that we saw that didn't know what the best decision was. The issue wasn't at all intellectual. In other words, if we put a choice of all the sort of available foods on a table, we didn't, there was no one that we served that didn't know exactly which food choices would be better and what quantities would be best. The issue was actually about having the appropriate action and doing it in a way that was of high quality. And so if we can have the right actions in a quality way, we don't have to worry about the results. The A student, people who perform well in school generally aren't focused on the A. They're focused on actually learning. They're focused on how do I learn this information, and it's usually that passion for learning that transfers into the results. It's not I wasn't as good of a student, and I focused on the A, so I know this from personal experiences. When you're focused on the result, usually you don't have the activities. When you focus on the activities, you normally get the result. Again, we don't have, if we're on I-70 or I-10 or I-90, we don't have to worry about getting to the West Coast and eventually to Los Angeles. We know that we're going to be going west, or if we go east a long way, we go around the other way, we'll eventually get there. But the point really is if we're not on the right road, we shouldn't expect to get to the destination we intend. We need to get on the right road. So the big things here are, we want to focus on activity and quality of activity. And so when we look to bring in measures around, did the training work, it's best to look at what are the resulting activities and qualities of activities. Again, the results will be the results, but if we reinforce and hold people accountable to the activity, the volume of activity they do, and the quality of it, we can't help but to get the results. Practice needs to be every day. It needs to be a part, that training, if you will, in quotes, should be a part of our daily language and reinforcement. And so it's really about how do we make sure that we have the habits of success. Success is a byproduct of having the right habits, and it's not in and of itself. Success is not an activity. The habits are the activity that cause the results. So love is, like Bobby Knight said, it's the will to practice to win. It's the actual commitment and engagement through the process of practice that creates the results. And when we get into the game, what we do is second nature. So while we're talking about practice, because this becomes a really important feature in training, is that, it's funny when you look at business, our ratio of practice to performance is really actually pretty abysmal. And I'd ask you to do a little self-assessment while we're here. Is, you think about the activities that you're training towards. Are you training salespeople? Are you training customer service? Are you training, for a variety of other roles? And so in those roles, think about how much time is spent practicing versus what your expectation is of your team in terms of performance. If they're salespeople, are they on the road, 4, 5, 6 hours a day? Are they meeting with 2, 3, 4, 5 customers a day, or maybe even more? And so there's all this performing that's going on, but how much practice is going on relative to that? I guess my experience in the professional world is, I can't think of a situation where any organization is anywhere near 1-to-1, and it's probably more like 0.001 to 1 in terms of the ratio, or 0.01 to 1 as would be really high. And so let's compare that then to sports and performing arts, which both of those are professional. Just like anyone we employ, we have a professional expectation. So it would be really rare in sports or performing arts to see any athlete or artist practicing any less than 5 times to the amount of performing hours, and you're more than likely to see 10 and 20 or more times practicing versus performing. If you go to, and I've actually read a fair amount of information on this, if you go to the higher level sports, let's say the NFL, I mean, they're practicing 50 to 100 times more than they're playing the game. And so what does practice mean? That means, not just on the field, but it also means the classroom time. It means the dress rehearsals. It means the walkthroughs. It means all of these various activities. I mean, heck, if any of you are married, you practice getting married. You go to you have a dress rehearsal. You have all this stuff. So practice, even in the most benign things today, we're used to practicing. And so there's no bigger effect that you can have on actually gaining the result you want in your training than to incorporate significantly more practicing. We want to, if our goal is to set people up for success, we want them, when they get in those high performance moments, when we get in those high value moments, we want them to perform optimally, and that means they need to be natural. And in order to be natural at something, you need to move from conscious competence to unconscious competence, and that takes time. It takes time and practice. So a couple of sort of quick quotes here. So studies show that push training programs only managed in transfer or to transfer a mere 10 to 20% of skills in the workplace. Pull learning is the model for the new knowledge economy. And to reinforce that, just a little information from the National Training Laboratory. So what they're saying with this pyramid is that when we are lectured to or read or get some audio visual cues, we're going to retain 10 to 20% of that information. On the other hand, when we practice, when we do a volume of practicing, and maybe when we even get into teaching others, which is an even higher level of understanding and competence, our retention rate goes up to 75 to 90%. So ultimately, again, the knowledge transfer is good and important in a logical first step, but it needs to be reinforced and consistently reinforced. And those skills, and again, it's not just about having the knowledge. We need to build the skills. Imagine if you had a doctor, maybe you had something wrong, and you had a doctor who had just read the book and hadn't practiced. I mean, the most natural thing any of us does when we need something from a doctor is we say, well, how many times have you dealt with this issue? If you're going in for surgery, how many surgeries have you done? It's the most normal thing to say. So imagine giving your customers somebody who hasn't done enough surgeries. I think we want to make sure that our customers perceive that our team has done enough surgeries to be competent and to be able to serve their needs. So the obvious question: what should your practice to performance ratio be? What should it be? Can you get it to 1-to-1? Is that doable? Again, whatever you do to improve that will have a fantastic effect. Practice, practice, practice. Again, we want to set our people up for success. The lack of practice it really undermines what we're hoping our people do when they're out on the street. So and as they say, hope is not a plan. So we got to do more than hope. So we're going to get into your questions, and I'm excited to do that. I want to just brief you on a couple of quick things before I come back on screen. So first, some of you may have heard of this. We actually launched a new program in December, and I'd certainly love any feedback on this. And if you know an organization that would benefit, we'd love that as well. This is a 8-week program. It's all virtually delivered. It includes a couple of webinars and a lot of practice on our Test My Pitch platform. But if essentially the program aims to help individuals, team members, build a stronger elevator pitch or networking self-introduction. And so far, we've worked with teams ranging anywhere from 50 individuals, I should say 5 to 50 individuals. We can certainly scale to bigger very easily, and it's a really powerful program. And the two things that it really does: number one is because individuals are practicing with frequency on our platform. Number one is we get a baseline, and so we see where every individual in the organization is in terms of their ability to communicate their elevator pitch or networking self-introduction. We know relatively how they're doing against their peer group, and then we can incrementally see their change as they practice more often, as they share those thoughts. So it's a really kind of cool system, and it allows for great benchmarking and certainly great skill improvement. Second thing I want to make sure you know about is our next webinar will be on Thursday, March 24th. And it's really going to be about how do we propel our teams, and this is particularly focused on the use of stage gates to ramp up individual and team success. And so we're going to go into in pretty good depth around how to best use stage gates to help our team grow much quicker. And in fact, this is really about reinforcing the right behaviors and creating a system that causes people to understand how to act, how to perform, whether you're watching or not. And that's really the goal. Again, if we're going to create independence, if we're going to empower people, if we're going to create much better results and get all the oars in the water rowing the right direction, we need to create a situation where people know how to make decisions, and that there's an easy way for them to do that. So this should be a really cool webinar. We're looking forward to it. There'll be a sign up coming out in our next e-newsletter. So certainly look for that, and feel free to share it with anyone you'd like. So let's get to the questions. So I'm going to stop the screen sharing here, and I should come back on screen in just a second. And so let me pop down through the questions, and certainly I hope you've submitted additional, but let's get down through these, and we'll go from there. So so the first question is, what do you train, and what gets left for trial and error? So yeah, I mean, certainly you don't want to take out individuals' ability to learn or self-learn in the process. That actually needs to be architected into your training system, is that that there's an element of discovery. On the other hand, if it's not in your training system, in other words, if it's not architected in, then it's going to be difficult to help the next person have that learning opportunity. And so I would say, you know, trial and error is certainly going to be part of the process, but it's much better if it's architected. So and again, the goal here isn't to script everything, but it's to enable people to have a very efficient discovery process, so that they internalize and adopt those essential skills that you're looking and that you need in order for your organization to be successful. So the next question is, what do you do when your team has the knowledge but not the behavior? And yeah, this is usually, you know, this is probably more the case than not in most situations that we see. And so, yeah, the real key here is to make sure that they actually have the behavior. So what do you do when your team has the knowledge but not the behavior? It's really about, you know, developing methods for practice and helping them adopt the behavior. So it really comes down to a couple fundamental things. One is that you've practiced it enough so they actually internalize that knowledge to where it's sort of a manifested ability or skill, and then ultimately building systems of reporting that keep people between the lines. You know, if you imagine lines on a road, that keep them in between the lines on the road, if you will, so that they drive the direction that you're hoping. And so again, the reporting is key, and having the feedback on that reporting be congruent. And I've seen, sales is probably a pretty good example in this area in most organizations. I've seen lots of organizations create standards or expectations around sales activity and other things related to sales, but very few have the will to actually enforce those standards. And so what does that do? The minute you don't enforce the standard, so in other words, a standard might be, we expect you to have meetings with 10 current customers or prospects a week, just to pick one. So the minute an organization does not reinforce that, essentially they lose the trust of their team. And so once that isn't reinforced, then ultimately individuals begin their adherence to those standards really diminishes, and so what ends up happening is even your high performers will lose their motivation, because they'll see the lack of will of the organization. And again, think of yourself, you kind of remember back to your any sports experience you've had. If you're on a team with poor players, most of us tend to play down to those players or leave the team. And so really what we want is to always be challenged by a better player. And it's easy to keep people, or easier to keep people on a winning team with great players. Much harder to keep people on a poor team that doesn't play well. So yeah, we want to make sure that we have both the practice, and that we've got sort of the standards that organize people in a way that allows them to be successful. Because if we know it's going to take 10 appointments a week to be successful, just to pick a number, and we allow people to have 6 or 8 or whatever number as a normal rule, then we're essentially saying we don't really care if you're successful or not. In fact, you're probably not going to be successful, and we're enabling that. So we want to be really careful of that. We're really not doing anybody any favors by knowing what works best. Think of yourself as a parent. You know what works best, and we enable them to do something that is incongruent with that. So, okay, so next question is, how do I know when my training is working? Great question. It's really when the behaviors that your training was aimed at creating are exhibited consistently. I mean, I think that's it. Again, you have to have the confidence that the behaviors will cause the results. And obviously, if they don't, then you've been creating the wrong behaviors, or there's something else out of whack. But ultimately, we know if we aim the car west on I-90 or I-10 or some road in between, we're going to get to the West Coast. We don't have to worry about that. We know it will happen. So maybe we have to figure out how to put a little more coal on the fire to get there, but ultimately we know we'll get there. How do we measure proficiency and long-term behavioral change? Yeah, so measuring proficiency, again, there are a variety of diagnostics that will help with that, and then certainly behavioral change. If we have standards, then really just measuring against those standards will tell us what behaviors changed. So that almost with any role, we can have standards of expectation, and then and again, most people focus those on results. If we focus those on behaviors, we're going to be much stronger, because again, if we know the behaviors that cause results, it's really not hard. And again, we think of behaviors as sort of organizational. By this role, what behaviors cause the organizational goals? Pick 2, 3, 4, 5 things that are what you need to reinforce, and begin with those as your standards, so that you can measure against them and train to them. Train daily, as we've said. Next question: how to motivate new team members? Really key, right? That's a really good question. So, training really starts with the hiring process. Your first day of training is the first interview, and it may even be prior to that, and when they see your ad or whatnot. But I think I'd be a little concerned. The question starts with how to motivate new team members. So if we hire well, we don't have to motivate people. So they should be motivated. They should come to us motivated, and then our system should help keep them motivated. And so it's really about getting people into the right system that causes them to find amazing success. And that's really key. So some of you may have heard of Dr. Edward Deming. He was a quality expert that traveled around the world. He's heralded as sort of being the sort of the innovator of many of the new quality standards. And he said that actually 80% of problems in businesses are not due to staff or employees. They're due to systems or lack thereof. And so the better our systems, the better our team will perform. And again, this is not meant to be punitive. It's really about setting up systems that empower and enable success. Yeah, next question. How do I replicate my best performers? You guys don't have a copy button? No, probably not. So yeah, the more, and what you'll find actually, I think in many cases is that you have more best performers probably than you think. And so when you start looking at what your standards are, what causes what the results that you're aiming for, what activities by role cause the results or the success that you're looking for, then what you're going to find is probably more people on your team are doing certain parts of that really well. And so when you can identify, or even better, when your team can identify those individuals, what you're going to find is probably a pretty natural process where people start mimicking better performers. So what caused us, I mentioned this employee self-management system a little bit ago, what caused us to actually begin developing that was actually a pretty pretty bad business issue. We had a situation in one of our businesses where just an employee made a bad decision, and so it was something that was ended up being fairly expensive for us. But as it turned out, it was okay. We actually ended up turning lemons into lemonade pretty well, and actually that created this whole employee self-management system, which really altered our understanding of how to help people be wildly successful in their roles. And really, the first realization was that we didn't feel we had any employees who got up in the morning and said, "I really can't wait till I can get into work today and not do a good job. I can't wait to get in there and mess up." And our realization was we didn't think we had anybody on our team that would say that or that wished that. And so if they didn't wish that, then they very likely wanted to do a good job. And so all of our effort then focused on that realization that our team likely wanted to do a really good job. And we were derelict in our job as managers by not enabling and empowering that. And so it was really an epiphany for us. It was a paradigm shift, and it really helped us understand, how do we get our team to perform much better? And it was really by engaging them in the process, and they were just fantastic and helping us experiment with this system, and in fact have affected sort of how we've done this several times over the last few years in terms of helping teams perform much better. So really, it's about recognizing what each individual, and maybe not each, but those that are performing at least an aspect of the role well. It's by reinforcing that and then democratizing that as much as possible. And what I mean by democratizing it is making the other team members aware of it in a very collegial way. So the next question is, what role do managers play in training? Well, they are the cornerstone of it. If managers, number one, aren't the most engaged trainer of their teams, there's going to be a real challenge. And so they need to not just support training, but they need to be reinforcing every training opportunity they have. And so one of the things we see that actually really challenges this is, so I'm going to go back to a sales example, but I think there are lots of other examples. So what I see happen quite often with managers, if they're, let's say, riding with one of their reps and they're in at a customer meeting, maybe the rep will start off the meeting, and at some point during that meeting, the manager will chime in, and they will, in essence, take over the meeting. And for better or worse, that completely depowers their rep. And and so maybe the manager saw something, the rep wasn't doing a perfect job, and they were worried about losing the business. And so they jumped in to save this one specific opportunity. Maybe it was a prospect appointment. They want to make sure that they got to the proposal stage or that they got the business. I will venture to say that in 99 times out of 100, or 990 times, 99 times out of 1,000, that really undermines the process. And in fact, the manager has no idea where the rep was going from where they were, and they may well have covered exactly what the manager was saying, and the manager lost a really good opportunity to be an observer, and then after the meeting to debrief and coach and create a variety of learning moments if there were any. But it's, managers, the biggest thing managers can do is shut up and observe when people are performing, and then have coaching moments afterwards to say, okay, what do you think you did well? Where do you think you can improve? Here are my observations. Why don't we role play that? Why don't we practice it? Let's set up a couple of times to practice it over the next few days and whatnot. But ultimately, we're not going to help people if all they're ever doing is observing us. We could go back to that pyramid that I showed earlier, but people have to do in order to learn. They have to do things incorrectly. They have to have a safe place to practice. And if you don't want them to practice in front of customers, you better set up a lot more practice time without customers. Again, go to the NFL example. They're practicing 50 to 100 times more than they're playing in games. What's your ratio? I think that's it. If right now your staff, your team is practicing with your customers. Is that what you want? Maybe we can improve that ratio and make ourselves much more efficient. The last question we have. So how do I hold people accountable for training? Well, you have to make it important. Again, ultimately, it's really, really valuable and really key when training is supported from the top down. And so making sure that that our team is training, that we're not just training, but we're practicing, we're reinforcing, we're using every moment to be an example of what the best way to perform is. And again, giving people that experiential knowledge so they have not just the knowledge, but also the skills. And so holding people accountable, just like any standard you would have, it's really about what are your expectations with training, paint the white lines on the road, and then keep people on the road. Create the systems that allow people to discover when they're veering off the road so that they can continue on and as we've been saying, so they can get to the West Coast. If they veer off and begin heading south on I-35, that they're going to have a hard time getting to the West Coast because I-35 doesn't get there. So hopefully that helped. We really hope that this content has been valuable for you. We would be terribly excited and really interested in having additional conversation with you. Hopefully we've inspired you in some way today, but please let us know what additional questions you have. We would be happy to certainly set up a time to talk and answer any additional questions or talk through any specific scenarios that you have. So we wish you all really well and hope to talk to you very soon. Thanks so much. Have a great day. Bye now.